Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of To My Younger Self,
the #1 support network for students and graduates.
made by young people for young people.
It's Alicia here.
And it's your girl Praise.
And today... you introduce it.
Today
episode.
we are going to be doing a breakdown into the whole big bad world of law. So we're going to be taking you through essentially what law is, what corporate law is, what commercial law is, the different types of laws there are, and the different types of career opportunities and paths that you can take if you decide that you want to get into law. And Alicia's going to be asking me a bit about my experience in the whole legal sector, all from searching firms to applications to getting my training contract. And we hope you find it insightful and helpful, because I would have really appreciated having someone break this down for me when I was younger. Yeah.
Period.
Purr.
Firstly.
That's so weird.
I don't know my vibe of the week.
It's so weird saying, like, speaking and then doing vibe of the week, because I just spoke.
I know,
But
yeah.
anyways, we're going to start this off with my favourite segment, Vibe of the Week. If you don't know what it is, it's where we give you listeners, you viewers, a recommendation from something that we've been doing, something that we've really liked or enjoyed, that we'd recommend to you guys. So I actually haven't thought of one, but off the top of my head, I have three.
Free vibes of the week.
Not vibes of the week. Vibes of the week. My vibe of the week is music.
Okay.
And the vibe of the week that I'm recommending to you guys are 3 songs that I've been loving recently. The first one is called 30 for 30 by SZA featuring Kendrick Lamar.
I knew you was going to say... That was going to be my vibe of the week. Oh, the new album.
That's the way I like it.
I knew
Another song that I've been playing on repeat is Pookie's Requiem by Sailor. And it's like, I hope you're happy. Got you winning me. Bet you meet your mom. Bet you get a bag and name it after me. Hey, Pookie. You heard it?
No, I don't know
Okay.
that song.
Solid. And then the third one is actually by a friend of mine. I know, and I've been listening to it since it's been released. It's really good. It's called Cold Nights. It's a single, and
I'll check it out.
should type in by Pud and Boyo Kwasi. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but you spell it Pud and then BOYO space KWASI, and the song is called Cold Nights. It's from a friend of mine who I met at... I didn't actually meet him at camp, but we worked together. So proud of you, congrats, and everyone should give it a listen.
My favourite song from SZA's new album is Another Life. In another life. Oh, na, 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 na,
I haven't listened to it, you know.
In another life.
That was
So
pitchy.
good. I don't know, Praise. Can you give me one?
Any series, movies that you've been enjoying?
Oh, actually, yeah. Oh, yeah. The Traitors. That's my vibe of the week. Yeah, have you been watching The Traitors?
Though. I've watched
What
the
episode are
first
you on?
3 episodes.
Okay.
First 3.
Well, no spoilers, but The Traitors is a fantastic show. I started watching it a few years ago because my nana put me onto it. It's on BBC. You can watch it on BBC iPlayer. All the episodes are there. And to be honest, there's not that many episodes out at the moment, so there's not too much to catch up on. But it's really good. The concept is, it's a bit like Mafia, if you've ever played that. But basically about 20 people maybe get grouped together and they have to go off into a castle. And it's a British show, and I love British telly.
Castle.
Yeah, castle, spoken like a true northerner. And it's a British show. We love a bit of Brit reality TV. It's not really reality TV. It's
it is,
a game
technically.
show. Well, yeah,
yeah.
kind of. Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, they're all in this castle, and there's a few people that are picked to be traitors, and the rest of the people are faithfuls, and they've got to figure out, each night there's like a round table vote, and they've got to figure out who the traitors are. So it's a very simple concept, but it gets very intense, very dramatic. There's a lot of tears because you just don't know who the traitors are. Like, it could literally be your best mate in the castle. And I've really been enjoying it. And yeah, I really like Freddie, who's on it.
course you do.
Low-key, I think we should get Freddie on the pod.
I haven't watched it yet, so if he's out, he better not
He's
be.
He's not.
But the one thing I was saying about Traitors, because I was watching it with a friend, and I was saying or trying to explain that I've always felt like I love Traitors. Like, I love it so much. Like, it's what every time it comes around, I'm very happy to watch it. But there's something that happens where I always feel like people from, it's not even ethnic minorities, just people of colour always end up going first. Have you noticed that?
I didn't notice it, but I didn't notice it, but I noticed that some people get like ostracized from the group. Like,
it just happens all the time, like all the time. They're always the first ones to go, the first ones to be voted out, which I feel like is probably unconscious bias, but yeah, a good vibe of the week.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, shall we get into the thick of the episode, what everyone's here for, how to get into law? And I'm quite excited for this as well, because I think law is one of those sectors that's quite alien. If you don't know the system or how to get into law, it can seem very, very daunting. So I think this will be a great episode, and there's no one better to answer these questions than Praise, because she's an expert. So
if you say so.
So let's get into it. So firstly, I wanted to ask you about your journey into law. So what made you decide that you wanted to become a lawyer?
So for me, the reason why I decided that I wanted to become a lawyer was quite a combination of things. So firstly, I just remember being like a physics class, maybe like year 9. And then I was like, this doesn't matter to me because I won't be doing this. Like, I just knew my future wasn't in the sciences or maths, because it just wasn't, not simple, but I had no enjoyment for it. It took 10 times longer for me to actually understand things simply. And then I realised, what would I want to do instead? And I was pretty set on law from then. But in terms of actual things that made me want to do it, I did work experience quite early on in like year 9, year 10. And one of them was at a citizens advice bureau.
Oh yeah, I was going to do that.
Yeah, so I went...
That's actually quite a good place to do your work experience if anyone's listening and having a think about where to do it, because it can apply to a lot of different industries.
And the way I got it was literally my mum and I walked in and we were like, hi, I just wanted to see what it would be like. And I felt like they were really open to that. I don't think there was like a proper formal process. So that was that.
Because I think it's just volunteering.
Yeah, exactly.
So you just it's quite, you just need to send in your CV or like do what you did.
And so that was really insightful for me, because I got to see the type of things they do deal with. Obviously, they're not lawyers, but they are advisors in the legal field. And they would have actual lawyers come in from time to time to help with certain matters, and that for me was really like interesting. And then after that, I then in sixth form I started going to like these insight days at law firms and also university, like thinking about what I wanted to do at uni. And because I thought, law's what I want to do, that's why I went to LSE to study law. But through the insight days that I went to at some firms like Clifford Chance, where else did them? Hogan Lovells. Lots of firms have like year 12, year 11 insight days, just for you to get into or understand what like law is about. There's also some charities I know called like the Sutton Trust who do pathways to law schemes, and that's for like year 12, year 13 students, just so you can get an insight into what law is. And so I was on some of those, and that's where I was like determined, cool, I probably do want to do law as well as study it. And last but not least, I actually like come from a family of lawyers, I would say. So my dad's a lawyer, and I wouldn't actually say he never ever outright said, I want you to do law or study law or be a lawyer. But I think probably subconsciously through like seeing his day-to-day job, what the things that he does, that's what inspired me to be like, yeah, I'd enjoy a career like this. But that sort of changed along the way when we get into the type of law that I'm doing.
That fits nicely into the next question. When you say type of law, what do you mean by that? Like, what are the different types of law in different areas? And do you mind explaining a few of them?
So traditionally, when you think of law, it's just like the word law is very small for what actually is involved within the legal sector, as well as like you can say consulting, but they're like different strands. So a type of law that the one I'm going to is commercial law, and commercial law is all about like it's the whole commercial world of businesses and what goes on within businesses, managing not even those relationships, but dealing with matters that might come up in commercial law of companies and that sort of management. However, within commercial law, there are different strands. So there's something called corporate law, which is actually to do with corporations and businesses, where you would deal with things like mergers and acquisitions, and that's when you have a company that wants to join with another one. So it could be like Primark wanting to join with River Island, which will probably never happen, but that's an example of what a merger would be. And then acquisition is when a big company wants to take on or buy another company. So that's something that would come up in corporate law, which comes under commercial law. However, there are other types of law, which is a simple one, criminal law. And that's like something that lots of people find interesting. That's what I find or found interesting. There are other types of law, which is like family law. That's to do with matters within a family. So divorce, children, what else? Surrogacy, marriage. Yeah, like it's wide. And then there are just lots. So you could have environmental law, IT law. So that's like essentially what you can get within law, I
That's
guess.
quite interesting. I like how broad it is. It is quite similar. There's a lot of similarities with consulting. I mean, we spoke about this before.
Yeah.
Even like with the mergers and acquisitions, like that's something you would do in a consulting project, but it's just like we're looking at it from different angles, which is quite cool. But how do you actually decide like which I guess type of law is best for you as an individual?
So in my case, it was pretty simple for me to realize what was best for me, but I think it's more of a gradual thing. So if you're ever thinking, oh, what type of law do I want to go into? I don't think you shouldn't feel rushed to make a decision, because for me, I didn't even know until whilst I was doing applications, and still to this day, I don't know what exactly I plan to specialize in, because when I start my training contract, I'll try the different seats out, and whichever one I enjoy the most is what I'll go into. But how I whittled it down was I did family law in my third year of university, and I also did employment law. So these were modules that for me were quite interesting, and those were what I was actually considering going into and properly loved. However, my dad is an example of someone who does like family law. And because of that, there have been times when I was younger that I would go to court with him and just sit there. And I realized I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
And it's in the sense of I always wanted to, from a young age, do a type of law that really helps people and really impacts people's lives. And that's still something I want to do. So it's still something I'm going to figure out how I can do that. And I guess I had to change my mindset in some way, I'm doing that in commercial law, which is what I'm going into. But for right now, I can't do family law just because of how impactful it is in negative ways. Like you see the cases that people go through in terms of abuse, or families being torn apart, or children being taken away from their parents, or parents not being able to see their children because of family breakdown relationships. And for me, I knew it's not something I can handle right now.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future.
Maybe in the future.
But it's all these questions that you should be asking yourself. Is it something that you see yourself doing long term? Even criminal law, like lots of people love criminal law, but a factor that lots of people turn away from it is because it's quite, you don't get paid well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, they're all important things to consider, definitely. So you, in terms of education, you took the educational route of studying law at undergraduate level at LSE, and then at postgraduate you went to law school. Was it BPP?
Yeah, BPP.
BPP.
BPP University.
BPP. So then you went on and did your postgraduate in law. So that's one way of getting into law. What are some other routes and options for people that might not want to study law at undergraduate level?
So it's actually become a case where it's not necessary for you to do law or to study law in order to become a lawyer. And I don't know the actual proportion, but I do feel like a large majority of people who are in the legal field or who start a training contract, they study a different degree for undergrad. So if you're interested in history, for example, you go to university to do history. And then once you leave and you want to pursue a career in law, you do something which is called the GDL. And that's basically a conversion course where you study the necessary modules that we did, like law students did during their time at university within 1 year. So under the GDL, you do like tort law, contract law, what other mandatory ones are there? I think property law, commercial law, corporate contracts, modules like that within a year. And once that's done, I think that basically assumes that you're able to, start.
And then the standard route that you did the SQE. Can you just explain what that is?
So the SQE stands for the Solicitor's Qualifying Examination. And it's actually good that you mentioned that, because with the SQE, I think it was introduced to stop people from having to do the GDL as well.
Right.
So you would go straight from university and everyone would just do the SQE. That's what it was supposed to do. I don't think it's actually turned out that way. So it will probably slowly change in time, where what the SQE was introduced for is that. But the solicitor's qualifying examination is something everyone has to do, whether you did a GDL or you did law at undergrad. And it's like a qualifying, you get a certificate for passing it, but you have to do it before you start your training contract.
Right.
And it stands in place for something called the LPC, which it still exists, but the LPC is like once you finish doing your legal undergrad. Can you hear my voice? No, it's like rusty.
No, it's not bad, don't worry.
Once you finish doing your legal undergrad degree, the LPC was like what you had to do to become like what you didn't get taught at university. It basically standardizes you before you start working. And these are all things that you'd have to pass before starting work. So the SQE is what I did.
It's so complicated.
It is.
Glad you're here to break it down for
I
the people.
I truly didn't know I had to do this because even in university, I didn't think I had a clear understanding of how to even start a career in law. So yeah, that's the SQE is something that most people have to do if you get a training contract, or even if not, like it's the next step for you after graduating.
Well, I think that like ties perfectly into the whole purpose of the podcast, helping people like break into industries that there's so many like loopholes and stages, and hopefully we can help you just have an understanding of how to actually get to the position you want to be in, and just provide a bit of transparency and tear down the glass ceiling, I guess.
That's true.
Okay, so on to like the main conversation of the episode, which is about securing internships. I know in law you call it a vacation scheme, isn't it? But it is the same thing as a summer internship in like consulting and banking. So if we firstly talk about the pre-interview stage, so these are things that you did before you got to the interview to help you secure your vacation scheme. So what things do you think you did, such as like maybe open days, for example?
Yeah.
What things do you think you did that helped you stand out when it came to writing your CV and your cover letter?
I think most importantly, the things that I did was that I've always been actively involved in things from a young age. So when it came to having to put things on my CV, I had a lot that I could use. So it would even be from things I did in sixth form, whereas like I ran the African Caribbean Society, or as part of Spanish Debating Society. But I made sure I got involved in things in university as well, so that even if I didn't have direct work experience, which I did do in my case for law. So other than the Citizens Advice Bureau, I spent a week shadowing a judge at an upper tribunal in like the centre of London. I also did work experience at like a small law firm that's focused on employment law. So these are all things I did. But whilst I was doing work experience, whilst I was having active roles in societies, I made sure I noted everything down. So each day after my work experiences, I would have a note on my phone and be like, day one, this is what I did. So that when it came to writing my CV, I could actually state a specific type of document, which I shouldn't actually know at my age. But I remember that I did that and I'm able to put that there. So that was one thing I did. You mentioned this on the consulting episode where I quantified, where you quantify things. So you state the growth you were able to provide for a social media platform that you were part of, or how much money you were able to raise for charity. Like all these things I think were important. When it came to
your CV,
my CV, I didn't actually find it quite hard.
You did or you didn't?
No, I didn't. But I think it's because I had so much already with extracurriculars to put on there.
Did you have to whittle down what not to put on, or did you put on everything?
I whittled down what not to put on. So you said that you've had a CV for everything. For me, that was not the case, because with law ones... Oh, another thing, sorry, before I forget. There are online courses you can do. So Clifford Chance, for example, has one. I think Slaughter May has one. And these are firms where they put on like this digital course that you can get involved in. So it's sort of like a work experience, but it's just not in the firm.
Right, yeah.
And you can do all these things in your free time to show that you have an interest, even if you haven't had work experience yet. So that was another thing that I did. So having all of these things, when it came to my CV for specifically law firms, I would always just put like the legal ones, but I also would add or maybe dabble like a cheeky ACS position.
That's good. What tips do you have for the cover letter stage if you had to do that?
So when it comes to applying for vacation schemes or training contracts, you do, or most firms have like a personal statement that you have to submit, and it asks you like, why should you be picked, or why do you want to embark on a vacation scheme at this firm? And the way I always did it, which you mentioned again, I did it as why law, why the firm, and then why me. I think that's how I did it. I always started with like, why was I interested in law? Like, what started that? And then I spoke about what qualities there are in myself. Yeah, exactly. What qualities there are in the firm. And that's easily, you can find that on their website. So if you're not doing that, that's like an easy thing that you can do to just pick up marks, or at least show your interest or how you relate to the firm. And then I also would go through websites of firms and see what are the latest cases they've dealt on or dealt with, and relate that to something going on in the world in current time, and also show why I'm interested in that. So for example, if a firm had dealt with something in like data, for example, or they helped Google with a fine that they had to deal with in court, I would then use how I studied IT law to relate to that. And so like this would allow me to explore my interest further in this area. And that's how I structured it. So why law, why the firm, and also why me. And why me would be like my extracurricular activities and how it would make me a good lawyer. or best fit.
Perfect. And what's the importance of grades when you're applying for vacation schemes? Because I know me and you've had conversations before where you said that when applying, like law firms will look at your university module grades and also your A-level. And I can't remember if you mentioned GCSE as well or not.
So I'm not sure about GCSE, but I know they definitely ask for it. Like they ask for GCSE grades, they ask for your A-level grades, and they do care about your university modules, I would say, or the grades you get in them, which was why it was sort of important for me to do well in my first year of university because I knew I'd be applying for law firms. And the reason why I know it's important was because when it came to my vacation scheme and we were doing the interview for training contract, they literally asked people, why did you get a 67 on this module?
Instead of 70.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
But these are questions that they ask. So I wouldn't allow you to deter. But I was in a beneficial position because everyone had either graduated or were in their final year, whereas I'd only done first year.
Right.
So they don't have as many grades to go off of for me. So I didn't get that question.
Wait, what do you mean? Like, because you applied for it earlier than...
Yeah, so not even earlier. No, not even earlier. It was just... Maybe it was earlier, but everyone on my VAC scheme was either like... I was 20 at the time, I think.
Right.
And they were like 24, 25.
Oh, okay.
So they had just done it later.
Right.
I guess. But true, I would say it depends. It honestly depends. But I did just apply for it then. So grades are important, and I just say try your best. Like, try your best, but like it won't... That just because you get a low grade in something doesn't automatically mean no, it's not possible.
Yeah, and if it's not possible, watch a consulting episode and do your consulting.
No, it's possible. I promise.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Anything you want in this life is possible. I genuinely believe that. What was your experience with psychometric tests when you were applying for different law firms?
So honestly, that whole process wasn't enjoyable at all. And I think that's why second year of university was so hard or tiring, because things get more intense in terms of what you're learning in the second year. But with psychometric tests, all firms have different ones. So the most common one is one called the Watson-Glaser test. And it's a test where they ask you questions. You know, to this day, I can't remember now. I haven't done it in ages, but it's a Watson-Glaser test, and it asks you different types of questions and sees how you respond to it. And there isn't actually a pass mark that everyone is aware of. You don't know. You just submit it, and you either hope that you've passed or not. Some firms have it where if you've done the Watson-Glaser test in the past year, and you don't get through to a certain stage with them, you don't need to redo the test if you're already passed.
Right.
So they have that score of yours already there if you'd passed it previously.
What if you didn't? You get to do it again?
You get to do it again. But sometimes you could just do the Watson-Glaser test and they automatically tell you no. And that's that. That's where it ends.
Yeah.
But other firms also have different ones. I think Linklaters have this platform, and it's not games like you said, but you watch videos and see scenarios, and then you answer questions. How would you respond in this situation? And it very much varies per firm. So that's something I would try and look on their website for, because some often do have past papers to try out for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now moving on to the interview stage. So you've done all of your Watson-Glaser, is that the word?
Yeah, Watson-Glaser.
Watson-Glaser tests and everything. And you found out that you've made it to the interview. What did you do to prepare for your interview stages?
There were lots of different things I did to prepare. So the first thing I would say was I used external resources. So Rare Recruitment is, what would you define them as?
It's a platform that just helps people, particularly I think it's university students, get into different industries. So they can help you get into law, consulting, banking. There's quite a few different areas that they work in. And I don't think there's not a specific criteria. You don't need to be from a disadvantaged background, because I know all different types of people that are on it. But it does look at your A-level grades though. So it's like that's the only problem with it. It's like they take on high achieving students in the first place.
Yeah,
if that
that's
makes
true.
sense. But it is a great platform, to be fair.
Yeah, Rare Recruitment was one I used, and they basically had this whole I was on one of their schemes firstly, and with that scheme they had a bunch of open days and a bunch of sessions where they basically took you through how to prepare for interviews and how you should answer questions. So one of the methods would be like STAR. If they ask you about something, it would be situation, task, action, result. And I used that a lot for majority of my interviews, where if they asked me something, I would say it in that order, and it helped me sound calm, but also made sure I structured my answer and just wasn't rambling on. So that was one thing I did. I used like Rare Recruitment for that help. They also had some mock interviews with people. I also used my friends a lot. So I was very fortunate that obviously at LSE everyone's like trying to get vacation schemes or training contracts, and a lot of my friends, even some who were applying for similar firms or different firms, were going through the process at the same time. So we'd do mock interviews on each other. And in doing that, it was like they're helping you improve, but they're also learning from themselves. And that's what I was able to take on. That's what I did. Oh, and another vital thing that's always been important for, I think, and will always be, is commercial awareness. So commercial awareness is basically you having an understanding of what's going on in the world around you and how it affects different stakeholders. So businesses, customers, what's it called when businesses, what's it called, like resources, so people who are giving you items in a shop, for example, looking at all the things that are going on in the world and how would they affect a business. And I used the Wake Up to Money podcast. I listened to that for days on end every morning to prepare for my interviews. And also there's a site called Com Aware that breaks down all the latest news that's going on in the commercial world that you should know about. And I would look at that weekly and just write it down so that I'd remember it and add it to notes.
I think the point that you said about using your friends and being able to help each other is such a good point for like considering what university you should apply to go to. And we'll do a whole another episode on this, like choosing universities and choosing the degrees for you. But I think like with a place like LSE and even places like King's, just certain like quite career focused, career oriented universities. Yeah, you're in such a bubble where you can get that support from your friends, because even for consulting as well, like the amount of people that I know that did casing together from like LSE and King's and like UCL, Imperial, those sort of places. Whereas, you know, there are other universities that I have friends that attend there where their friends aren't even applying for like internships or spring week. So you're going to be a bit like, you might not have as many people to do mock interviews with, or you might find it a little bit more difficult. So I think that was a really good point, to be fair. So in terms of your actual interview day, can you explain the different stages of the interview and also just your experience on the day with your interview?
So I think it's important to mention that with interviews for vacation schemes or law firms, yes, it's very different and it will depend on which law firm you're applying to, but often there are multiple stages involved in the whole thing. So I know for one firm there were 5 different interview stages. The first one, no, actually, there are 5 different stages and like 3 different interviews. So one would be a video interview where they send you a link and they ask you a question, and you have like a minute to prepare and then a minute to answer each question. And after that, you would submit it and wait to hear from them. After that, you would have one based on, none of mine were ever in person, but it was because it was COVID, I'm pretty sure. You'd have like an online interview, which would be about a case study, for example, and they would send you a document that you need to review, and you need to write down what factors are important, or what you would advise the client, or what are some considerations that the client will need to think about. So what I always use for the case studies were PESTLE, which is political, economical, social, is it technological, environmental, and legal. And that's what I used when it came to these things. But in terms of my actual interview process, so for the firm that I had, or that I'm going to be joining, there were at least 3 stages. So obviously I submitted my application, and then I had my first interview, which was with GradRec. And she was just asking me about why law for me. So like, why am I interested in law? What motivated me to study certain modules at university. And then it was honestly quite simple. She asked about my hobbies, like, what do I enjoy doing? Why do I think I'd be a good fit in the firm? And those interviews I enjoy a lot more. And then I did the case study, submitted that, did my interview on that as well, where they ask you questions about it, for example. And then I heard back from them saying I got the vacation scheme.
How did you feel when you heard back? Were you expecting it?
You know, it took like a day for her to get back to me, but I think for them to get back to me,
Just
which
one day?
surprised me, yeah.
Wow,
Like, it was
that's
literally
so
the next
quick.
day. It was very, very quick. So I was very happy about that. Did I feel like I'd got it? I felt like my response to the case study was very strong. So yeah, I felt like it was strong, but honestly, the whole application process or application season for me is something where I feel like you never actually know. You might have thought you've done really well and they tell you no.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot of the time. I cannot tell you how many firms I applied to, but it was endless. And it could simply have been the same application, which you're not supposed to do. The same application or similar answer that you send to one firm, they will accept you, whilst the others will immediately just be like, no. So you never actually know what they want. It's always just in the hopes that what you've submitted is the best. But
I think sometimes it really just depends on who else is applying as well.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the time you can do your best, but it might be there's better applicants suited for the job, or like there was way more people on the interview and they were all very high quality, high standard, and they've got to pick some. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and sometimes firms, I think, care about different things, and you can tell it from the type of people that you have at a firm. I just want to put this in here where, for me, it was always important to join a firm where I felt like I would not fit in, but I would get on with the people there.
Definitely.
When it came to applying for law firms, I whittled it down by looking at, will I enjoy being there? So as much as I always thought, oh, I really want this job, or I really want to work in a law firm, I started looking at like how compatible, it sounds crazy, but how compatible is the law firm and myself, because I don't want to spend the next how many years of my life somewhere where the culture is just not for me.
And now we're moving on to your actual experience on the vacation scheme now that you've got it. What was that like? How long was the vacation scheme? What type of responsibilities did you have and projects?
So the vacation scheme was 2 weeks, and it was during the summer. I did mine during the summer. There are different times that you can do vacation schemes. So there are some you can do in winter, some you can do in Easter, and some you can do in summer. And so
Are they always 2 weeks? Because it's quite short.
yeah, it's very short. Some are even 1 week, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
It's very short, so you don't have a lot of time to like make a big impression. So that's why I'd say like from day one, I was very much, I honestly don't think I was too loud. I think I was still myself, but I was on it from the get-go in terms of speaking to people, or like if I was given a task, I would make sure I ask questions before starting it. So, and that was something that they gave me my feedback that they loved about it, because I feel like I've said this on another episode, but they said that I was the best back schemer they've ever had.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, I think the reason why that was the case was I was honestly just myself, but I worked hard and I acted as if I was actually working there.
Yeah.
So the work that they're giving me is or would be used, and I always bear that in mind. I also had the mindset that throughout the whole thing, you're always being watched. So like when you go for socials with people after, like at the end of the working day, or when you're in presentations or talks, like it's important that you pay attention. It's important that you look switched on. It's important that you ask questions because they're always watching these things. So that's how that was.
Yeah. How did you then convert that into a job offer at the company?
So traditionally, if you go through the vacation scheme route to getting a training contract, they do have a training contract interview at the end of you doing your vacation scheme. So I think the last 2 days of the job or last 2 days of the vacation scheme are dedicated to the training contract. And mine involved doing a presentation on like something going on in the legal sector. I did mine on data and General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, because I think that's actually something I'm really interested in. And hopefully once I start, it's something I can pursue further. So I did my presentation on that. And there was a partner there and also HR there. And they both asked questions in relation to my presentation. They asked me why I was interested in it, what solutions would I advise, what things would I introduce if I was in charge of the law, such like that. And after that one, I had a case study interview. And honestly, I didn't think that went very well. I not struggled, but I was just like, I don't know what's going on here. It felt quite confusing. But what I did do, which I think worked really well, was for one of the case studies. So they give you a sheet of paper and they ask you to read about it, like read it. And then they ask you questions about it. So in my case, what worked well was I used things I'd learned on the VAC scheme. So if I didn't know the answer, I said, I'm not too sure, but I do remember doing this task and this law came up about like social housing and that being implemented during COVID-19. So I feel like that potentially could be useful in this scenario because ABC. So my answer honestly could be wrong, but because I used things from what I'd learned on the VAC scheme, it showed that I was paying attention to the tasks I was doing. It showed I could like come up with ideas from things I'd learned previously. And I think that's why. And then there was a final one, which is just like a general interview on why you think you'd be well suited for the firm, why law, what you've enjoyed, what you haven't enjoyed. And my supervisor, and you also get a trainee buddy in my instance, they wrote a report on you as like what they thought how well you did overall. And I think everything worked in my favour. So yeah.
That's great. And then the last question I have for you about your experience on the vacation scheme is just about the overall experience in terms of the culture and the lifestyle.
Of law?
Yeah.
Of law or the VAC scheme?
You was only there for 2 weeks.
I was only there for 2 weeks.
From what you can assess, what is it like?
From what I gathered, I can tell they work hard. That's one thing. But I was able to notice that there are different seasons in different sectors. So, or in different, what's it called? Departments.
Right.
So for private equity, I know you know what that is because you mentioned you would never do that.
Disgusting. Would you?
I don't think so. I honestly don't think so. I don't think so. Because I did one of my seats there when I was doing my vacation scheme. Oh, and just to mention, I did like 1 week in a department called property litigation and then another week in another one.
I mean, private equity is big money. We'll get on some people from private equity if you guys want to hear about that industry. But it's not for me.
But for something like that, when I was there, they literally had no work for me to do because it was the end of some season, apparently. I'm not there yet, I don't understand it. But it was the end of season. So most most cases had closed, most matters are closed, so they didn't have much to do. Whereas in property lit that I was sitting in, it was very active, very busy. So I think depending on where you are, that's how busy you will be. And some nights will be like super late, but other nights will be like early. Like I remember my supervisor, I think it was like 5, and she was like, "Praise, go home." Like there's nothing for you to do, so just go home. But there were other nights where they were working a bit later, so it felt like very go with the flow.
Yeah.
They had quite a lot of not socials, but free lunch was a big thing there. But it was almost combined with people coming in to give talks. And if you come to the talk, you get free lunch. But the talks are interesting, I'm telling you. I felt a bit like a nerd, but I thoroughly enjoyed it because it's like, it's a win-win. Because I feel like as a lawyer and also with your career, you're going to have to constantly be aware and update yourself of what's going on in the world.
True.
So it would be like specialised talks on a specific sector, on
true.
what's the latest in
like a lecture.
employment law, for example. And I think it saves time. So that's that. And then the entry, like once you start, is around £100,000 after the 2 years. So
big jump. That's the thing about law. That's what I noticed. Just because, like, for example, consulting entry level is higher than that, but the jump in 2 years only to 100k, that is a massive jump. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm guessing that's after you completed the training contract, right? Yeah, that is such a big jump. Yeah, very well compensated industries that we're going into. We're very, very blessed. That's so funny. Right, well, thank you so much. I think that was extremely, extremely helpful. Listeners as well, if you found that helpful in terms of how to get into law, let us know in the comment section. But before we do go, I just wanted to ask you, we ask everybody on the podcast this question, every guest that comes on.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, literally. No, but the question I want to ask you is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self considering a career in law or about to start that journey?
I think the one piece of advice I'd give to my younger self, considering law or about to start, is that you don't actually need to have it all figured out in terms of being fully set on you wanting to pursue a career in law. I think from a young age, you're sort of forced to have everything figured out, especially in something like law, because the path is quite strict. But it's okay to still explore other options whilst pursuing law, and eventually, even if the 2 years for you, not even 2 years, like even if you decide at one point law might not be for you, there's nothing wrong with that. But just explore as many options as possible and see where that gets you.
Oh, thank you very much.
No problem.
Also, do you know what I just thought of? That's pretty cool.
What?
When we record these podcast episodes and we're asking, like, oh, what would you tell your younger self? When the episode comes out and we listen, we're listening to our younger self. That's deep. That's deep. Have you ever thought of that?
Yeah.
Like, when you're editing this back, you're editing a version of your...
I was thinking recently, when we're like 30...
Yeah.
Like... No, because our intro is like made by young people for young people. Honey.
Yeah, we ain't young no more. We might have to change.
No, 30's young. What are you on about? Maybe when we're like 60s. And then
made by middle-aged people for middle-aged people. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this careers mini-sode. Thank you very much for listening. And as always, we'll see you next week with another episode.
It's been your girl Praise.
And it's been Alicia.
And we will see you next week with another episode.
Bye.
Bye.